We called for help across the galaxy, only humanity answered. The chamber was built to make visitors feel small. It stretched upward for nearly a mile, its walls lined with thousands of alcoves where representatives from every known civilization in the galaxy sat watching. Bioluminescent crystals cast shifting blue light across the assembly, and the air hummed with translation frequencies, converting hundreds of alien languages into something each species could understand. Ambassador David Grant stood alone at the center of this impossibly vast room. He was the first human to ever address the full Galactic Council, and every eye, sensor, and perception organ in the chamber was focused on him. His heart pounded. His palms were wet with sweat, but his voice, when he spoke, was steady. Distinguished representatives of the Council, I come before you today not to defend humanity's actions, but to explain them. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Clicks, whistles, subsonic rumbles, electronic pulses. The translator in David's ear converted them to murmurs of interest and surprise. High Chancellor Vrix leaned forward from the central platform that floated above all others. The Chancellor was a being of living light contained within a crystalline shell, and when it spoke, its words resonated through the chamber like music. Ambassador Grant, your species has been aware of the galactic community for only 18 standard months. In that time, you have violated 11 separate treaties, interfered in 3 territorial disputes, and engaged in military action without Council authorization. You understand these are serious charges? I understand completely, High Chancellor. Then explain yourself. David took a breath. He had prepared for this moment for weeks. Everything depended on the next few minutes. 14 months ago, we received our first interstellar transmission. It was not from the Council. It was not a welcome message or an invitation to join galactic civilization. He paused, letting the silence build. It was a distress call. He activated the small device in his hand. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a star map. A single point pulsed red, the Velari system, a civilization of 12 billion beings across 4 worlds. They were being systematically destroyed by an invading force called the Crethan Collective. Their military was shattered. Their orbital defenses were gone. Their capital city was 3 days away from bombardment. The murmurs grew louder. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their alcoves. We had just achieved faster-than-light travel, David continued. We had exactly 6 ships capable of interstellar deployment. We knew nothing about galactic politics, nothing about the Crethan Collective, nothing about why the Council had not responded to the Velari distress calls that had been broadcasting for 7 standard weeks. High Chancellor Vrix's crystalline form pulsed with agitated light. The Velari situation was under review. The Council does not act hastily in territorial disputes. The Velari were not in a territorial dispute, High Chancellor. They were being exterminated. David's voice hardened. We had 6 ships. The Crethan had 400. But we went anyway. A Crethan delegate rose from its alcove. The being was massive, nearly 12 feet of armored chitin and razor-sharp limbs. You destroyed 73 of our vessels. You killed thousands of Crethan warriors. You have made enemies of the most powerful military force in the outer sectors. Your warriors were in the process of burning cities filled with civilians, David replied. We stopped them. You had no authority. We had every authority. The authority of conscience. The authority of basic decency. The authority that comes from being the only ones willing to answer when someone calls for help. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted over each other. Some demanded punishment for humanity. Others called for the Crethan to be censured. A few sat in stunned silence, watching this small, fragile human face down the most powerful governing body in known space. High Chancellor Vrix raised one crystalline appendage, and the noise faded. Ambassador Grant, you speak of conscience and decency. Noble concepts. But the Council exists to maintain order among thousands of civilizations. We cannot allow individual species to wage war based on their personal moral judgments. Then perhaps, David said quietly, the Council should make better judgments. The silence that followed was absolute. David pressed forward. I have studied your records, High Chancellor. In the past 100 standard years, the Council has received over 4,000 distress calls from civilizations facing extinction-level threats. Do you know how many times the Council authorized intervention? He let the question hang in the air. 17 times. 17 out of 4,000. The rest were deemed too complex, too politically sensitive, or not strategically important enough to risk Council resources. He changed the holographic display. Now it showed a list of names, species names, thousands of them. These are the civilizations that called for help and received nothing. Some were conquered, some were enslaved, some no longer exist at all. They sent their distress calls into the void, and the galaxy answered with silence. You cannot save everyone, Rix said. No, but you can try. You can at least try. David's voice cracked slightly, and he did not try to hide it. That is what humans do. When we hear someone crying for help, we go, even when the odds are impossible, even when we know we might fail, even when nobody else will stand with us. He looked around the vast chamber, meeting the eyes and sensors of delegates from 100 different worlds. Since the Valari rescue, we have received 37 more distress calls, from species inside Council territory and outside it, from civilizations you have abandoned and ones you have never even contacted. They call for help, and we answer. We will always answer. The Crethan delegate's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as contempt. You will not survive. Your tiny fleet cannot protect everyone. Probably not, David agreed, but we will die trying. And when we do, the galaxy will know that at least one species care enough to come. High Chancellor Vrix was silent for a long moment. Then, Ambassador Grant, what exactly do you want from this council? David smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was something fierce in it. I want you to remember why you created this institution in the first place. Not to maintain order for its own sake, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I want you to stop treating distress calls as administrative inconveniences and start treating them as what they are. Cries from beings who are frightened and alone and desperate for someone to care. He deactivated the display. I am not asking for your permission. We will continue our rescue operations with or without Council authorization. I am asking for your help. Join us. Send your ships alongside ours. Show the galaxy that when someone calls for help, they are not alone. The chamber was utterly silent. Then, from a small alcove near the back, a single delegate rose. It was a Valari representative, one of the survivors David's ships had rescued 14 months ago. My name is Tarais, the Valari said. My family lived in the capital city that the Krenin marked for destruction. They are alive because humans came. I stand with humanity. Another delegate rose, then another. Species that had received human aid. Species that had been abandoned by the Council. Species that had watched from afar and felt something stir in their hearts. Within minutes, over 200 delegates were standing. High Chancellor Vrix looked at the assembly, at the unprecedented display of solidarity, at the small human who had walked into the heart of galactic power and demanded that it become better. This council will deliberate, Vrix said finally. But Ambassador Grant, I believe you have already won something far more valuable than our authorization. You have won their trust. David nodded. It was a beginning. Outside the chamber, the galaxy waited. Somewhere out there, another distress call was broadcasting into the void, and humanity would answer. The distress signal had been broadcasting for 6 days. when the human ship Resolute dropped out of faster-than-light travel above the burning world of Kethros Prime. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge, staring at the destruction below. The planet's surface was scarred with impact craters. Debris fields of shattered ships filled the orbital lanes. And in the distance, a fleet of vessels bearing the insignia of the Dominion Trade Consortium was methodically bombarding the last remaining cities. "How many people are down there?" Maria asked quietly. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Park, checked his readings. "Approximately 800 million in the surviving population centers. The consortium fleet has been conducting what they call debt collection operations for the past week. They've already eliminated an estimated 2 billion civilians." Maria felt her stomach turn. The Kethrosians had borrowed heavily from the consortium to rebuild after a natural disaster. When they could not repay on the consortium's terms, Mega Corporation had decided to take the entire planet as collateral. Every building, every resource, every life, and the Galactic Council had ruled the action legally valid under existing trade agreements. "The consortium fleet outnumbers us 40-1, Park continued. "Their flagship Alon. He has more firepower than our entire task force." Maria looked at the other ships that had answered the distress call. The destroyer Vigilant, the frigate Horizon, 2 converted cargo vessels armed with whatever weapons Earth could spare. 5 ships against 200. "Open a channel to the consortium flagship," Maria ordered. The view screen flickered, and a Vexian merchant lord appeared. The species resembled large insects with golden carapaces, their compound eyes glittering with cold intelligence. "Human vessel, you are interfering with a legally sanctioned corporate action. Withdraw immediately or be classified as hostile assets subject to liquidation. My name is Captain Maria Santos of the United Earth Naval Command. I am ordering you to cease your bombardment and withdraw from this system." The Vexian made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "You have 5 ships. I have 200. Your species has been in space for less than 2 standard years. You have no understanding of galactic economics, no political allies, no hope of victory. This is not courage. It is stupidity." "Maybe," Maria said. "But those people down there called for help. And we came. They are debtors, property. They have no rights under consortium contracts. They are people. They have every right that matters." The Vexian leaned forward, compound eyes narrowing. "You will die here, human. All of you. And your whole world will be next. The consortium does not forget debts, and you are accumulating quite a bill." Maria smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Then come collect." She cut the channel and turned to her crew. "All hands, battle stations. Today we find out what we're made of." The Battle of Kethros Prime lasted 9 hours. Human ships darted through the consortium formation like wasps attacking a herd of elephants. They used tactics no other species had ever attempted, maneuvers that pushed their vessels beyond safe operating limits, strategies that defied every established doctrine of space warfare. The Resolute lost her forward sensor array in the first hour. The Horizon took a direct hit that killed half her crew. One of the cargo vessels was completely destroyed, its captain staying at the helm to draw fire away from the evacuation ships that were desperately lifting survivors from the surface. But the humans did not break. They did not retreat. By the 5th hour, the consortium fleet was in chaos. Human ships had systematically targeted their command vessels, their communications relays, their ammunition stores. The 40-1 advantage meant nothing when the enemy could not coordinate their fire. By the 8th hour, the consortium flagship was crippled. Its merchant lord transmitted a furious surrender, promising vengeance and economic ruin for Earth. By the 9th hour, the evacuation ships had lifted nearly 600 million Kethrosians to safety. Maria stood on her damaged bridge, watching the consortium fleet limp away. Her ship was barely functional. They had lost 2 vessels and over 300 crew members. Her body ached with exhaustion and grief. But below, on the burning world they had saved, people were still alive. People who had called for help and been answered. "Captain," Park said quietly, "we're receiving transmissions from across the sector. News of the battle is spreading. What are they saying?" "Mostly disbelief. Nobody can understand why we did this. We have no trade relations with Kethros, no strategic interest, no political benefit." He paused. "They keep asking the same question. Why would humans sacrifice so much for strangers?" Maria looked out at the stars, at the vast and indifferent universe that surrounded them. "Because if we don't, who will?" 3 weeks later, Ambassador David Grant received a visitor at Earth's embassy on the Council capital world. The visitor was a Kethrosian, elderly and frail, supported by a younger member of her species. "Ambassador Grant," the elderly Kethrosian said, "my name is Elder Myra. I was the chief administrator of Kethros Prime before the consortium attacked. I came to thank your species personally for what you did." David shook his head. "I'm just a diplomat. Captain Santos and her crew are the ones who deserve your thanks. I have already spoken with the captain, but I wanted to ask you something." Elder Myra's eyes were wet with emotion. "In all my long life, I have seen many species. Some kind, some cruel, most simply indifferent. But I have never seen anything like what your people did. You barely know us. You owe us nothing. You had no hope of victory. Why did you come?" David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "On our world, we have a very old story. A traveler is attacked on a road and left for dead. Many people pass by. Important people, powerful people. They see him suffering, and they walk on. Then a stranger comes. Someone from a different place, someone with no connection to the injured man. And this stranger stops. He tends the wounds. He carries the traveler to safety. He pays for his care." David smiled. "We call that stranger the Good Samaritan. And we tell that story to our children, so they remember that the measure of a person is not power or wealth or status. It is what you do when you see someone in need." Elder Myra trembled. "And your entire species believes this?" "We try to. We fail sometimes. We are not perfect. But we keep trying." The elder took David's hands in her own. "Then let me tell you what the Kethrosian people believe. We believe that when someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that can never be repaid. We believe that such debts create bonds stronger than blood." She straightened, despite her age and weakness. "The Kethrosian people declare themselves allies of humanity. Where you go, we will follow. When you call for aid, we will answer. Your enemies are our enemies, and your cause is our cause." David felt something tighten in his chest. "Elder Myra, we didn't save your people for payment or alliance. We did it because it was right." "I know," she said. "That is why we offer it. Because you are the kind of species that deserves such loyalty." As she left, David stood alone in his office, thinking about what was coming. The consortium had already filed protests with the council. The Krethen Collective was still threatening revenge for the Valari incident. Earth's navy was stretched thin across dozens of rescue operations, but they were not alone anymore. The Valari stood with them. The Kethrosians had just pledged their support. And across the galaxy, other species were beginning to wonder if perhaps there was another way to do things. His communicator buzzed. Another distress call. A mining colony in the outer sectors, being raided by pirates that the council considered too minor to address. David opened a channel to the Resolute, which was already en route to the nearest repair facility. "Captain Santos, I hope you're not too tired." Maria's voice came back, tired but determined. "What have you got, Ambassador?" "Mining colony. 2 million people. Pirates. Send me the coordinates." David smiled. "You've already done so much? Nobody would blame you for standing down." "Maybe not. But those people called for help." There was a pause. "And humanity answers." The channel closed. David looked out his window at the alien stars and the impossible galaxy that surrounded them. They were small. They were young. They were outgunned and outmaneuvered at every turn, but they were not going to stop. The trap was perfect. The humans never saw it coming. The distress call had come from the Nexari colony, a small agricultural world on the edge of Council space. "Raiders," they said, burning their crops, killing their livestock, threatening to enslave the population unless they paid impossible demands. Captain Thomas Reed of the destroyer Valiant had responded immediately, jumping his task force of 4 ships across 3 sectors to answer the call. He was a veteran now, 6 months and 12 rescue operations under his belt. He thought he knew what to expect. He was wrong. The moment the Valiant dropped out of faster-than-light, proximity alarms screamed across every console. The space around them was filled with warships. Not raiders. Military vessels. At least 60 of them, arranged in a precise blockade formation dot, and at the center of the formation floated a massive dreadnought, bearing the insignia of the Crethan Collective. "It was a fake," whispered Lieutenant Harris at the tactical station. "The distress call was fake. They lured us here." Thomas stared at the enemy fleet. His mind raced through possibilities, but there were no good options. They were outnumbered 15 to 1. Their faster-than-light drives needed time to recharge. They were completely surrounded, the view screen activated without request, showing the face of a Crethan war commander. The massive insectoid being radiated hatred through every gesture, every click of its mandibles. "Captain Reed, I am War Commander Craxus of the Crethan Collective. You and your species have caused us great offense. You interfered in our conquest of the Velari. You supported rebels against our trading partners. You have embarrassed us before the entire galaxy." Thomas kept his voice steady. "We responded to people in need. That's not offense. That's decency. Your decency has cost us 17 ships and thousands of warriors. Today, we collect the debt." Craxus leaned forward. "Surrender your vessels, and I will make your deaths quick. Resist, and I will ensure you suffer for days before the end." Thomas looked at his crew. Young faces, most of them. People who had volunteered for these missions, knowing the risks. People who believed in what they were doing. He thought about his family back on Earth, his daughter, who had just turned 7, his wife, who had begged him not to take this assignment. Then he thought about all the people they had saved. The Velari children who were alive because humans had come. The Cathrosian families who had escaped the bombardment. The mining colonists who slept safely because someone had answered their call. "All hands," Thomas said over the ship-wide channel. "This is the captain. We walked into a trap. I'm not going to lie to you about our chances. They're not good." He paused. "But I want you to know something. What we've done these past months, it mattered. Every life we saved, every colony we protected, every time we showed up when nobody else would. That mattered, and whatever happens today, nobody can take that away from us." He turned back to the view screen. "War Commander Craxus, on behalf of humanity, I respectfully decline your offer." For a moment, Craxus was silent. Then his mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You are brave. It will not save you. All units, destroy the human vessels. Leave no survivors." The Crethan fleet began to move. Thomas opened his mouth to give the order to fight when his communications officer suddenly sat up straight. "Captain, I'm detecting something." multiple faster-than-light signatures. Incoming vessels bearing 270. How many? I can't wait. The officer's eyes went wide. Captain, I'm reading over 100 ships. They're not Crethan. They're not human either. Space rippled. Reality folded. And into the void poured a fleet unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. There were Velari warships, their hulls painted with traditional markings of gratitude and alliance. Cathrosian cruisers, hastily armed, but crewed by beings who remembered who had saved them. Ships from a dozen other species, some that Thomas did not even recognize, all flying in formation toward the Crethan blockade. A new voice cut through the communication channels. It was Elder Myra, the Cathrosian leader, and her voice was steel. War Commander Craxus, you have made a serious mistake. You thought you were trapping humanity alone. But humanity is not alone. Not anymore. Another voice joined, a Velari military commander. The humans came for us when nobody else would. Today, we come for them. More voices. Species that had been rescued. Species that had watched from afar and been inspired. Species that had spent centuries feeling powerless against the great powers and were suddenly discovering that there was another way. This is the allied fleet of the free worlds, Elder Mira announced. We are 117 vessels strong. We are here to escort our human friends home. You will let them pass, or you will face us all. Craxus's image flickered with what might have been fear. This is madness. You are challenging the collective. You will be destroyed. Perhaps, said the Velari commander, but we will be destroyed together, and we will be destroyed standing for something. Can you say the same? The standoff lasted for 7 eternal minutes. Thomas watched the tactical display, watching two fleets stare each other down, waiting to see which way the universe would break. Then, slowly, the Crethan ships began to withdraw. One by one, they pulled back from their positions, creating a corridor through the blockade. Craxus appeared on screen one final time. This is not over, humans. You have made enemies today that we'll never forget. Thomas smiled. We've also made friends, and I think we got the better deal. The Allied fleet escorted the human task force through the Crethan formation and into open space. When they were clear, when the danger had passed, Thomas opened a channel to Elder Mira. Thank you. I don't know how you knew we were in trouble, but thank you. We intercepted the false distress call, Mira replied. We recognized it as a trap, but we also knew that you would respond anyway, because that is who you are. Her voice softened. We could not let you face that alone. Not after everything you have done. Thomas felt something in his chest that he could not quite name. Pride, perhaps? Gratitude. The overwhelming realization that the impossible thing humanity had been trying to do was actually working. Elder Myra, when we started this, we were 6 ships and a dream. We never expected anyone to stand with us. That is why we stand with you, Myra said. Because you did not expect it. Because you did what was right, without hope of reward or recognition. That is the rarest thing in the galaxy, Captain Reed, and it deserves to be protected. As the Allied fleet traveled toward friendly space, word of the confrontation spread. The Crethan collective had been faced down not by the Council, not by any great power, but by an alliance of minor species, united by gratitude and principle. In the council chambers, delegates whispered. Some were afraid of what this meant for the established order. Others were inspired. A few began to wonder if perhaps they had been on the wrong side of history. And on Earth. In the command center, where the naval operations were coordinated, Admiral Victoria Hayes received report after report of new species wanting to join the alliance. How many? She asked her aide. 17 formal requests for alliance in the past 6 hours. Another 43 unofficial inquiries. The aide shook his head in amazement. They're calling it the Coalition of Free Worlds. They want humanity to lead it. Hayes looked at the star map on her wall, at the dozens of points marking rescue operations and allies and enemies, and everything in between. "We didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "No, Admiral. But it seems like the galaxy decided to give it to us anyway." Hayes thought about all the people who had died to get them here. The crews of the destroyed ships. The soldiers who had given their lives protecting strangers. The families who would never see their loved ones again. She thought about what they had paid and what they had purchased with that payment. "Tell the coalition representatives that we're honored. Tell them we accept." She paused. "And tell them that we're just getting started." The aide nodded and left. Hayes stood alone with the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. They were still small, still outgunned, still facing enemies who would never forgive what they had done, but they were no longer alone. And that made all the difference. Outside her window, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 civilizations. Somewhere out there, someone was calling for help. And now there was an entire coalition ready to answer. The Galactic Council had not held an emergency session in over 300 years. The last one had been to address a pandemic that threatened to spread across 12 sectors. Before that, a civil war between founding members. These were events of galaxy-shaking importance, crises that demanded the full attention of every representative. Now, for the first time since any living delegate could remember, the emergency chimes rang through the council chambers. The topic was humanity. Ambassador David Grant stood at the center of the great assembly hall, surrounded by hostile faces. The major powers had demanded this session. The Crethan Collective, still humiliated by their failed ambush. The Dominion Trade Consortium, furious about their losses at Kethra's Prime. A dozen other factions whose interests had been damaged by human interference. High Chancellor Vrix presided over the assembly, crystalline form pulsing with barely contained energy. This session has been called to address the growing instability caused by human activities in the outer sectors. The floor recognizes the representative from the Crethan Collective. War Commander Craxus rose from the Crethan alcove. His voice dripped with venom as he addressed the assembly. Distinguished delegates, for 18 standard months, humanity has been a cancer spreading through this galaxy. They violate treaties. They ignore established territorial rights. They support rebels and insurgents against legitimate authorities. He gestured toward David with one massive claw. And now they have organized a coalition of minor powers in direct opposition to Council authority. The so-called Coalition of Free Worlds represents nothing less than an attempt to overthrow the galactic order that has maintained peace for millennia. Murmurs of agreement rippled through certain sections of the assembly. "We demand action," Craxus continued. "We demand that humanity be expelled from the Council. We demand that their coalition be declared an illegal organization. And we demand that military force be authorized to restore order in the affected sectors." David waited until the Crethan had finished, then stepped forward. "May I respond, High Chancellor?" Vrix nodded. "War Commander Craxus speaks of peace and order," David said. "Let us examine what that peace actually looks like." He activated a holographic display. In the past 18 months, while humanity has been what the commander calls a cancer, we have responded to 47 distress calls. We have saved approximately 4 billion lives. We have prevented 6 attempted genocides, 12 illegal conquests, and countless smaller atrocities. He changed the display. In the same period, the Galactic Council authorized intervention in exactly 0 of these situations. 0. Because every single one was deemed too complex, too politically sensitive, or not SDR. Strategically important enough. The Council cannot respond to every crisis. A delegate from the consortium protested. No, David agreed. But you could respond to some. You could try. His voice hardened. Instead, you sit in this chamber and debate procedure while civilizations burn. You passed the Kethro situation to 17 different committees while 2 billion people were being murdered for debt collection. You declared the Velari conflict too complicated to address while the Krethen were preparing to exterminate an entire species. He turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates throughout the chamber. You call us destabilizing. You call us dangerous. But the truth is, we are simply doing what you should have been doing all along. We are answering the calls you ignore. Kraxus slammed a claw against his alcove. Pretty words. But you are still just one species with a handful of ships. Your coalition is composed of weaklings and failures. You cannot oppose the combined might of the established powers. Perhaps not, David said. But we can make you think twice. We can make you calculate the cost. And most importantly, we can offer the galaxy an alternative. He activated a new display. This one showed the coalition of free worlds. 67 member species as of that morning. 142 vessels. Mutual defense pacts and shared resources in a unified command structure. Every species that joins us is a species that no longer fears you, David said. Every world that allies with us is a world that knows someone will come if they call for help. Every day, your threats become less effective. Every day, the old order loses a little more of its grip. A consortium merchant lord rose from its alcove. You cannot change the fundamental structure of galactic civilization with 67 minor powers and good intentions. Economics will crush you. Politics will isolate you. Reality will teach you the lessons you refuse to learn. Maybe, David admitted. Or maybe reality will teach you something instead. He took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything had been building to this. Distinguished delegates, I have a proposal. Not a demand, not a threat, but an offer. The Coalition of Free Worlds is willing to work within council structures, under certain conditions. The chamber went quiet. First, we want a seat at the table. Not as observers, but as full voting members with real authority. Second, we want the creation of a rapid response force, authorized to answer distress calls without waiting for committee approval. Third, we want a formal review of all treaties that were signed before the affected species achieved spaceflight. Treaties used to justify conquest and exploitation of peoples who never had a fair chance to negotiate. Impossible, Kraxus spat. You demand we surrender our rights. I demand you earn them, David replied. Show the galaxy that you deserve your power. Show them that you can be trusted to protect the weak instead of preying on them. Show them that the Council is more than just a club for the strong to divide up the spoils. High Chancellor Vrix leaned forward. Ambassador Grant, you ask for revolutionary changes to institutions that have functioned for thousands of years. I asked for the institutions to live up to their founding principles. The Council was created to maintain peace and protect civilizations. Somewhere along the way, it forgot about the protecting part. David spread his hands. We are offering you a chance to remember. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Speeches were made, accusations hurled, threats issued and countered. But something had shifted in the chamber. Species that had remained silent for centuries were speaking up. Delegates who had always voted with the major powers were asking uncomfortable questions. And when the session finally ended, without resolution, but with the promise of continued negotiations, something unprecedented happened. A Draxi delegate approached David in the corridor outside the chamber. The Draxi were a minor power, too small to have attracted attention before, too weak to have called for help with any hope of being answered. Ambassador Grant, the Draxi said, My species has watched your coalition with great interest. We have been oppressed by the consortium for 300 years. We did not know that resistance was possible. David nodded. It's possible. It's hard and costly and dangerous, but it's possible. We wish to join your coalition. We would be honored to have you. The Draxi hesitated. You must understand, we have nothing to offer. No ships, no weapons, no strategic value. We are farmers and craftspeople. We cannot help you fight your wars. David smiled. You misunderstand why we do this. We don't help people because of what they can offer us. We help because they need help. That's the whole point. The Draxi stared at him with an expression that the translator could not quite render. Then slowly it bowed. My people have a saying. When you find water in the desert, you do not question why it is there. You drink and give thanks. It's straightened. Humanity is water in the desert. We give thanks. As David returned to the coalition shuttle, surrounded by allies and protected by friends, he thought about how far they had come. 18 months ago, they had been alone, 6 ships against a galaxy that did not care. Now they were a movement, a force, a promise that things could be different. The Council had not given them what they wanted. Not yet, but they had not rejected them either. The door was open, just a crack. And sometimes a crack was all you needed. His communicator buzzed. Another distress call. Another crisis somewhere in the vastness of space. Another chance to answer. 2. Years after the first human ship responded to its first distress call, Ambassador David Grant stood once again in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. But this time, everything was different. The coalition of free worlds had grown to 112 member species. Their combined fleet numbered over 400 vessels. They had successfully defended 37 worlds, prevented countless atrocities, and fundamentally changed how the galaxy thought about mutual aid and collective defense. And today, after months of negotiation, they had been summoned to hear the Council's final decision. High Chancellor Vrix's crystalline form glowed with solemn light as the assembly fell silent. The Council has deliberated on the proposals submitted by the Coalition of Free Worlds. We have considered the arguments, reviewed the evidence, and consulted with affected parties throughout the galaxy. David held his breath. Around him, coalition representatives from dozens of species did the same. It is the decision of this council that the following reforms be implemented. Vrix paused. First, the Coalition of Free Worlds is hereby recognized as an official autonomous body within council structures, with full voting rights and independent authority to conduct humanitarian operations. A wave of shocked whispers spread through the chamber. Second, a rapid response force shall be established, composed of vessels from willing council members and the coalition, authorized to answer distress calls without prior committee approval in cases of imminent threat to civilian populations. The whispers became a roar. Delegates from the old powers shouted protests. Others cheered. Centuries of tradition were being overturned in a matter of minutes. Third, Vrix continued, raising one crystalline arm for silence, a formal review board shall examine all treaties signed before the affected species achieved interstellar capability. Those found to be coercive or exploitative shall be subject to renegotiation. War Commander Craxus rose from his alcove, mandibles clicking in fury. This is betrayal. The Council has surrendered to terrorists and rebels. The Council has evolved, Vrix replied calmly. Something that should have happened long ago. The Crethan Collective is welcome to submit formal objections through proper channels. But THE decision stands. David felt hands on his shoulders. Elder Myra stood beside him, tears streaming down her aged face. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. We did it, David corrected. All of us together. As the session concluded and delegates filed out, David found himself face to face with High Chancellor Vrix in a private corridor. "Ambassador Grant," Vrix said. "A word, if you please." David nodded, following the crystalline being into a small antechamber. "You should know that this decision was not unanimous," Vrix said. "The major powers voted against it. The established economic interests voted against it. By the traditional weighting systems, your proposals should have failed. What changed? The minor powers. The species that have spent centuries being ignored, exploited, used as bargaining chips in larger conflicts. They voted together for the first time in Council history. 237 species, casting their votes as a block. Vrix's form pulsed with something that might have been wonder. "Do you understand what you have accomplished, Ambassador? You have not merely created a coalition. You have given voice to the voiceless. You have shown the powerless that they have power if they choose to use it." David was quiet for a moment. "We just answered distress calls. That's all we did." "No, you answered them when no one else would. And in doing so, you taught the galaxy that no one should have to call into the void alone." Vrix moved toward the door. "I have lived for a very long time, Ambassador. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves and others in pursuit of power." The High Chancellor paused. "But I have never seen anything quite like humanity. You are young, fragile, limited in so many ways. Yet you have changed everything simply by caring. It is the most remarkable thing I have witnessed in 3,000 years." After Vrix departed, David walked slowly through the corridors of the Council headquarters. Making his way to the observation deck, where Coalition representatives had gathered to celebrate, he found Captain Maria Santos there, her uniform now bearing the insignia of a Rear Admiral. Thomas Reed stood beside her, promoted to Commodore after the Crethan ambush. Elder Myra, the Valari commander, dozens of other faces that had become friends and allies over 2 impossible years. "So what now?" Thomas asked. "We won. The Council accepted our terms. What do we do next?" David looked out at the stars through the massive viewport. Somewhere out there, civilizations were still suffering. Peoples were still being exploited. Distress calls were still broadcasting into the void. Now, he said, now we keep going. The reforms are just the beginning. We have a rapid response force to build, a review board to staff, relationships to maintain. The old powers will resist every step. They'll look for ways to undermine what we've built. They'll test us constantly. "That sounds exhausting," Maria said with a tired smile. "It will be. But we're not in this alone anymore." David gestured at the gathered coalition representatives. "We have allies. We have resources. We have something to protect." Elder Myra stepped forward. "May I say something?" David nodded. "When humans first came to save my world, I asked Ambassador Grant why. Why would strangers cross the galaxy to help people they had never met? He told me a story about a traveler on a road, about a stranger who stopped to help when everyone else walked past. She looked around at the assembled beings, at the impossible alliance they had formed because one small species had chosen to answer a call for help. I understand now why that story matters to humanity. It is not about the individual act of kindness. It is about what such acts create. It is about the ripples that spread outward, touching more and more lives until the whole galaxy is transformed." She placed a hand on David's arm. "You have created ripples, Ambassador. Your species has changed everything. And I believe, with all my heart, that the galaxy will never be the same." David felt the weight of those words settle over him. The responsibility, the hope, the terrifying possibility that everything they had sacrificed might actually matter. His communicator buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled. Another distress call? Thomas asked. No, it's a message from Earth. My daughter drew me a picture. She says she's proud of her dad. For a moment, the weight lifted. For a moment, he was just a man, a father, someone with people he loved waiting for him to come home. Then he straightened. All right, who wants to help me build the future? The coalition representatives moved forward, ready to work, ready to serve, ready to answer whatever calls might come. Outside, the stars shone down on a galaxy that was learning, slowly and painfully, what it meant to care for one another. There would be setbacks. There would be failures. There would be dark days when everything they had built seemed ready to collapse. But somewhere in the vastness of space, someone would call for help. And now, they would never call alone, because humanity had taught the galaxy a simple truth that had somehow been forgotten over thousands of years of civilization. When someone needs help, you help them. That was all. That was everything.